911. You need...
Hello, police. Help me, I'm Amanda Berry.
You need police, fire, or ambulance.
I need police.
Okay, and what's going on there?
I've been kidnapped and I've been missing for 10 years and I'm here, I'm free now.
Now, the call you just heard was from May the 6th, 2013, when a woman escapes from a property in Cleveland, Ohio, that would go on to be known as the House of Horrors. Amanda Berry vanished 10 years prior at the age of just 16 years old, and her disappearance was a highly publicised case with sightings, suspects and leads, but all of this unfortunately led to nothing. And by the decade mark since Berry was last seen, the vast majority of the public had lost hope. The case was now cold. But then on that morning of May 6th, residents of Seymour Avenue were shocked to see a woman pleading, banging, screaming on the door for someone to come to her rescue so that she could escape from the property. So not only do we now know that missing for 10 years, Amanda Berry has emerged from the house, she has a child with her, and she has stated that there are more women in that house.
There might be others in the house. Adam 23 radio.
Go ahead.
We found them. We found them.
The remaining two women found inside the property, chained up, were Michelle Knight, who went missing in August 2002, and Gina DeJesus, who went missing in April 2004. Which means that in the space of under 2 years, 3 women are all kidnapped from the same area. 3 women are all taken from the same road, Lorraine Avenue in Cleveland, Ohio. And all 3 of those women were held captive against their will for the best part of 10 years. And the biggest question that you will now have is, what sort of monster would be capable of doing this? And this is where we meet school bus driver and part-time musician Ariel Castro.
So this is a case that you've been telling me to research over and over and over again. This is something that's obviously stuck in your mind, right? So I'm a bit
obsessed with it.
You are obsessed with it, right? So I did my research, and I think, having looked at that picture behind you and having heard all the details of that case, this guy seems to me like a complete wrong-un.
Yeah.
Really, doesn't he?
Yeah.
Like
with the context that we have to hand.
Yeah, with the context that we have to hand. But there's more to his story than just those outward facts, aren't there? I suppose there's a bit of backstory to him that we have to discuss straight off, right?
There is, and I think the first thing we should touch on is like the community aspect of things. I'm guessing you've done just as much research as I have on this one, mate. Did you find anyone that said that they suspected him of any wrongdoing, or that he gave them a bad vibe or anything like that?
Like, basically, people have been saying he's a school bus driver, which is quite a... You have to be quite a trusted person in the community to even get that role, don't you? You basically have to be able to deal with all of these kids every day, to trust to drive them, which in America is, sometimes a pretty scary place to be on the roads in America. We've seen the car chases, we've seen the car crashes. And not only that, he was also he was a musician, wasn't he? And whenever people talk about his music career, they always say he was a brilliant musician, really intelligent guy. He came across really well, articulate, smart. And to be able to play at the level he played at, again, there's some sort of like credibility to him there, isn't there?
Not only that, he was one of the longest serving residents on the road that he lived on, despite having quite a closed off lifestyle in terms of how much the other residents of the road knew about him, and clearly knew about what he was actually up to. He was described as personable. He was described as a guy that would lend you something. If you were fixing your car out the front, he would come and help you. He would go over and give people food and say to people, oh, cook this up and whatever, try some of it and whatnot. There's so many stories of like residents of that neighborhood saying he was just a normal guy and nothing was really seen out of place. But I think that living in the community that he lived in, there was a lot of comings and goings. And as I say, he lived there for, I think, the best part of 20 years, definitely over 15 years. And he would have been one of the longest serving residents on that road, Seymour Avenue. So I think that a lot of people knew him in his later years and whatnot. And what they didn't know was the backstory to what went on in that house before any of the abductions had taken place.
Can you give me a bit of a backstory on him then as a person, right? Because we've understood like his sort of story in the sort of contemporary times, but I don't know about his past, his childhood, like any previous relationships he has. So why don't you just quickly tell me about that?
Yeah, so Castro basically is born in Puerto Rico. He moves to Cleveland, Ohio as a youngster. He has a rough childhood. I think he's beaten, claims that he was assaulted as a child and things like that. And eventually, when he's around 20 years old, he strikes up a relationship with a woman named Grimilda Figueroa, who actually lived across the road from him at the time. Now, a relationship blossoms between the two of them and eventually results in them moving into a property together, 2207 Seymour Avenue. And although this would eventually be known as the House of Horrors for the brutal and inhumane incidents that took place there over the 10-year period in which the three women were held captive, the dark events that took place in that house started a lot earlier.
This is part of the story, right, that concerned me the most, actually, because when you look into the history of his family, it gets very dark very quickly, doesn't it? Like, he has 4 children with this woman.
Yeah.
But the way that he treated her was so malicious and so dangerous that really warning signs and potentially even the police should have been involved, shouldn't they?
Yeah, well, they were involved on a few occasions. Obviously, it was no secret that he beat Figueroa. He broke her nose, he broke her ribs, he broke her arm, he threw her down the stairs at one point. It eventually led to him, obviously, separating with her. She left. She was assisted in leaving by the police and she was granted full custody of their children. Now, once she gets granted full custody of their children, one of the concerning things, and again, it's another one of those moments when you know the context of what ended up happening, you think, oh my God, he had history for it. She consistently reported to the police that Castro would frequently abduct their children. So he would either go to the school, abduct one of the daughters and another daughter on a different occasion and stuff like this. And as the story goes on, you'll hear about the just sick ways that Castro would use his children. But we get back to this. She's moved out of the house, right? She's suffered years of abuse. Now, one of the key injuries that actually happened during this abuse at the hands of her former husband, Castro, was she developed a blood clot on the brain. And that blood clot ended up leading to a inoperable brain tumour. And I think it was in the year of 2012, she actually passed away from complications of that. I don't know what degree you put it in the States, but let's be honest, before any abductions had even been discovered.
Could have been done for murder straight away, couldn't he?
There you go.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
Now, she's moved out the house and Castro has time on his hands now. And
the kids aren't in the house, by the way.
The kids aren't in the house.
So he's living in the family home by himself.
He has no custody to the children, yeah? I think, from what I read, Figueroa would let a lot slide.
Yeah.
And wouldn't report a lot of the things, the stalkings, the abductions and whatever. Now, it's on record from the police. She had reported some of them, but I think there was a lot of stuff that went unreported and things like that. He did have some sort of relationship with his children. Once she moves out the house, he then has time on his hands, right? And he has time to let his sick fantasies fucking start running away with himself and whatnot. And he starts a renovation job on the house. Now, he starts boarding up the windows, doesn't he?
Oh, he wasn't just doing the kitchen then?
He was not just doing the kitchen, my friend. He was boarding up the windows. He was filling the house with mirrors, so there were no blind spots in the house. He was drilling holes in the walls. He was threading chains through those holes. Castro was making it into somewhat of a dungeon. He wanted to take someone and to hold someone captive in that house. So on August 23rd, 2002, 21-year-old Michelle Knight is on her way to visit the social services as she's trying to get back custody of her son, Joey Knight. How weird.
Is this why you even started watching this?
Honestly, honestly, I had no idea about it. Yeah. Obviously, what people don't know is it's not just weird because it's Joey Night.
There is a familial connection in that your
my sister's name is Michelle Night as well. It's mad, isn't it?
So just to let you guys know, just for clarity's sake, your mum wasn't kidnapped.
My mum wasn't kidnapped.
No.
Not by him anyway. No. But yeah, mental. So I'm starting watching a story and I'm watching her documentaries. I remember the news breaking. That's the thing. I was like obsessed with the case when the news broke. And it was only when more media came out around it after that I realised that this woman who had my sister's name also had a son who had my name. So mental. However, despite being on her way to a social services meeting, Michelle, who is known to have learning difficulties, becomes disorientated on her way, and she enters a dollar store where she asks a cashier if he knows the way to the social services office. And Castro is also in that same dollar store, and upon overhearing, he offers Michelle a lift. And Michelle realizes that Castro's actually the father of one of her friends, Emily, and due to his seemingly relaxed and gentle nature, she accepts the lift.
So the thing to remember here is that Michelle, although she is 21, she has learning difficulties, and social services knew of that. I think everyone really knew that, didn't they, about her? For her to be offered a lift and to take it isn't too surprising.
It's
in the context
not
of this.
massively out of the ordinary for someone who was mature, way below her years type thing. And not only that, she was also very, very young looking for her age. She was really short and she was young looking for her age. She might have even been a premature baby if mine serves me right. So she was very underdeveloped almost for her age. My belief would be that Castro didn't know her age. I think he would have thought she was younger than, and I've read that in a few different articles, but whether it's true or not, I'm not sure.
What I find so sad about this as well is that Michelle and Michelle's mum were having an argument about the custody of the kids, if I remember correctly. And what I find so upsetting is that throughout all of the news coverage and everything like that, Michelle was never really talked about. And in fact, do you remember in the interview that the sort of the phone call, I should just say, with the 911, he actually says that I found the two girls. They say, I found Amanda, I found Gina, but I've not found... He didn't even mention Michelle.
No, because Michelle wasn't really presumed missing. You've got to remember, she was 21. She was of a legal age. And the other thing that people will be wondering now is how did he manage to get her into his house? Because surely she knew that this house wasn't the social services office. And again, this comes back to her mental underdevelopment, we'll call it. I don't know the correct term. I'm hoping that is, whatever. Yeah. But...
her mental acuity wasn't really there, I think, is the way to say it.
He allured her in with the gift of a puppy to be able to give to her son. So once again, Michelle Knight is thinking of her son in this moment, and she's thinking, that's so brilliant, she's emotionally immature and whatnot, mentally immature, and she's thinking, right, not only am I trying to get custody back of him, I can surprise him with a puppy. She thinks that she's about to be in for a lovely moment and whatnot when she enters that house, takes the puppy, leaves, goes, and hopefully gets her son. But upon entering that house in 2002, Michelle Knight was never seen again. Yeah, so as we say, like, no media coverage really of her disappearance because of her age. Everyone assumed that she's not happy with her life, so she's just run away from home. No news stories, anything like that. And after, I think it was 12 months, she was removed from the missing person register, which was quite controversial, but only in hindsight. Now, Michelle is starved, beaten, raped multiple times during a sort of 8-month period following her abduction. She also falls pregnant multiple times. Michelle's been quoted as saying 4 or 5 times, and each single time that she falls pregnant, Castro beats her into losing the baby, abortion basically, against her will of the baby. And I think it's, listen, I would not downplay the significance of what any of the victims of this case was subjected to, but I think it's fair to say that Michelle Knight probably got the worst treatment out of all 3 of them, and especially during that 8-month period of captivity, until one day everything and the dynamic of that household changes.
So on April 21st, 2003, Amanda Berry was walking home from her shift where she was working at Burger King, and it was the day before her 17th birthday. She was actually thinking about calling in sick from this shift because she was meant to be enjoying her birthday.
What did they call that? Divine intervention?
Yeah.
Or something like
Imagine
that?
if that happened. Again, it's a sliding doors moment, isn't it? Like, if she had called in sick, perhaps this wouldn't have happened. But obviously, she's walking back on Lorraine Avenue, the road in which Castro has his house. And that's where it all happens.
Do you know what, mate? Like you say, if she had called in sick, maybe this wouldn't have happened. Ariel Castro met Michelle Knight by chance and then realised that Michelle Knight knew one of his daughters. Amanda Berry had been someone that Ariel Castro had been watching, it transpired, basically.
He had some fantasies about
He had some fantasies about her. He had been watching her.
Yeah.
And she's obviously approached by a man that she doesn't really know, but a man that she then realises is Ariel Castro. He pulls up on the side of the road. He offers her a lift. Now, again, there's always the people in the comment section and whatnot. Stranger danger. We're taught as children from this sort of thing. But you've got to remember, it's a little bit like the Ted Bundy case, right? The man behind you doesn't look like a charming man or anything like that. And I'm not saying that these young women were charmed by him, but what he didn't seem like was a aggressive, threatening type man, you know? He really had a Jekyll and Hyde personality that could split, and he was very, very good emotionally manipulating people and whatnot. And when he pulls up alongside Amanda Berry, he lets Amanda Berry know straight away that she works with his son. Not only that, he lets Amanda Berry know that he is the father of Angie Castro, who is actually a friend of Amanda Berry's. So he offers Amanda Berry the ride. Already Amanda Berry, I think, had phoned her sister asking for a lift home that day anyway, so she wanted to get home as quick as she can. She accepts the lift off of Castro. Now, during the ride, he tells her how his daughter Angie is at home and he would love for her to pop in and quickly see her so that she could wish her a happy birthday. And once again, fatefully, Amanda Berry accepts the invitation into Ariel Castro's home.
And again, that is the last time that she is heard from for a very, very long time.
Yeah, now obviously upon her disappearance, the police treat this one a lot more seriously than the Michelle Knight case, don't they?
Yeah, they absolutely do. So you hear TV coverage of this, like there's like announcements going out throughout the community. This is taken far more seriously and you hear so much more. But then something really weird happens, mate. Then, a week after the disappearance, there is a phone call that goes to Amanda's mother, was it? Was it her mother?
From Amanda Berry's cell phone.
Yeah, and that person doesn't identify himself, but he says, I am with Amanda. And what else he says? He says he's going to keep her safe.
No. So he says, Amanda's with me, she's safe, and she'll be home in a couple of days. And that is when it very much goes in the sort of mind of the police from a missing person case to an abduction case.
But the thing is, she never does return home. We don't hear from that caller ever again. And then, really, Amanda's ordeal starts. She is locked in Castro's home. She is subjected to horrific treatment, similar to Michelle Knight's.
Hundreds.
Assaulted, chained up, and really it's a new victim. But the key difference...
That's it. Like, sorry to jump in there, mate, but you just said there, similar to Michelle Knight. In a way, she wasn't treated all that similar to Michelle Knight, right? And again, she was treated horrifically. I hope this piece of shit rots in hell, mate. I'm not underplaying anything. But when I say she wasn't treated in the same way as Michelle, Amanda Berry was obviously younger than Michelle. Castro was more attracted to Amanda Berry than Michelle, and therefore he didn't have Amanda Berry in the same locked room, let's say, for example, that he had Michelle. He actually had Amanda Berry sleeping with him. He used to call her his wife. He used to treat her with way more luxuries, I would say, than he did Michelle. This is where we really start to understand some of the psychology of this man, because cold-blooded detectives are very good at being able to put aside emotion and go, right, what is the motivation here? And at the moment, we're saying the motivation is sexual, aren't we?
Yeah.
But as things sort of transpire, you start to understand that it's also very, very psychological, and he's getting a kick out of these sort of horrible little psychological ordeals that he's putting the women through, and especially being Michelle, when the news coverage of Amanda's disappearance starts really tumbling kicking off.
Didn't he have to sit Michelle in front of the TV and make her watch all of the news coverage, and it was all about Amanda, nothing about her?
Yeah, and Michelle has said since in her book and whatnot that was a consistent thing that he used to tease her about, the fact that people cared about Amanda's family were looking for her and whatnot, and no one was looking for Michelle.
Yeah, the psychopathic nature of this guy is obviously coming through here. Not only had he prepared the house to be, let's be honest, mate, it's kind of like a torture house, really, is the only way to describe it. Yeah. With all of the chains, all of these barricades going up. But yeah, the individual abuse of these women was so consistent on like a daily basis. And I remember something, you know, in the documentaries that we've seen, I remember he would do experiments where he would leave doors open, but be around the door on the other side waiting for these women to try and escape. And if they did ever try and escape, the consequences would be severe. It wouldn't just be beatings, it would be starvation. And it would be more and more abuse. So he conditioned these women to not just fear the confines of where they were, but just the actual, even if there was a chance to escape, they couldn't do it.
The consequences that potentially could have happened. And I would say that conditioning period went on so thoroughly and was so extensive, where he would, on purpose, as you say, leave these doors open, leave a lock undone or something like that, and would be hiding ready to give these girls a beating. It went on and was so intensive that I would say that even once they did get the opportunity to escape, if I had to put my money on it, there were probably multiple opportunities that
they just didn't take. Because they were so terrified of the consequences.
Now, when we get back to the psychological side of things as well, he took great pleasure in letting the women watch all of the media coverage of the cases and things like that, anything he could get. One of the parts of this case that infuriates me the most, like, just fucking makes my blood boil, mate. And people say this is mad because we're in the backdrop of a man who's done horrific things, worse than anything that I can think of. But Amanda Berry's mum goes on to a daytime TV psychic show hosted by a woman called Sylvia Brown, and this woman delivers some damning news to the mother of Amanda Berry.
Resident psychic Sylvia Brown spoke of Amanda.
Don't think I'll ever see her again. Yeah, in heaven on the other side.
The WMMS morning show reenacted the transcript. Host read the part of the psychic.
I hate this when they're in water. She's not alive, honey.
You know that Amanda's watching this because of the way that Castro is manipulating these girls, right? He's obviously forcing these women to watch this. If you try and put yourself in her shoes here, how do you think she feels?
I don't know, but if I'm Amanda Berry, do you know who I hate in that moment more than Ariel Castro?
Go on.
That fucking bitch psychic. What a fucking wrong 'un, mate. It's one thing being a psychic and lying to some poor fella who wants remorse, whose wife has died of I don't know, cancer or something like that, and saying, yeah, she's looking down and delivering, I don't know, like good news or something like that. You're scamming people for a living, and you should be ashamed of yourself even doing that. But to tell her mum that her daughter is dead, and they actually pulled up the transcripts from the whole entire episode because you only saw a segment of it, and the psychic Sylvia Brown says, I hate this when they're in water, she's not alive, honey, and all this, and it's like, in water and not alive, like, you fucking dirty fraud, mate, you horrible person doing stuff like that. I found that psychic fucking disgusting, mate. But obviously, look, we get back to it. No one's more disgusting than the man himself. But what we should touch on, despite Amanda Berry's mum still showing such resilience and character to still look for her daughter, Amanda Berry's mum died about 2 years after that, meaning that she went to her grave not knowing that her daughter was out there. And if she believed that psychic, she went to her grave believing that her daughter was dead.
But also, even after the amount of time period that's been gone, like, she's been missing for a considerable amount of time, she must have feared the worst, let alone the psychic stuff. So to have that voice in your head that then almost confirms your worst fears, honestly, I feel like she's been through so much, that mother. So I feel so sorry for her.
Yeah, Horrible, disgusting stuff. But the kidnappings and the captivities did not stop there. Almost a year to the day since Amanda's kidnapping, Castro strikes for a third and final time. Once again, this sick fucker uses his children as a means to lure in his victim. His daughter, Ariel Castro, has a best friend at school that Ariel takes a liking to, and on April the 2nd, 2004, Ariel Castro spots Gina DeJesus walking home from school. She's once again on Lorraine Avenue and is taken just a stone's throw from the Burger King that Amanda Berry worked at. Now, Castro uses the same tactics to get her in the car. He's telling her that he needs help finding his daughter, who's her best friend, before luring her back to the house. And once inside, he locks her in the same room as Michelle, and the pair sort of form a sister-like relationship. Now, at the same time as this, and having Gina DeJesus in captivity, being that he knows the family, he's acquainted with them, it was his daughter's best friend, he is attending candlelit vigils and hugging members of the family, isn't he?
I heard language to say he was leading the vigils. Yeah. Like he was actually performing speeches and like was a key part of them. This is so like classic psychopath, isn't it? Like you hear this quite often, like psychopaths will go to the scene of a crime to almost relive it, but also sort of soak up the atmosphere. Do you know what I mean? And do you know what, mate? When I heard this story, like there's a lot of twists and turns in this, but this is something where you just see the psychopathic nature of him as a person.
Well, not only that, like the thing that blows my mind about it is Michelle Knight's one went under the radar. No one spoke about it. No one really knew about it. Without sounding horrible, like it almost wasn't a big deal, right? The Amanda Berry one is big news. But despite his son working at the Burger King as Amanda Berry and his daughter being friends with her and whatever, it's not all that close to home. They're more associates. Gina DeJesus is reportedly the best friend of his daughter. So being that we know he had some form of relationship with his daughter, not only is he attending these vigils and stuff like this, what, you're telling me that he hasn't had sort of deep and emotional conversations with his daughter about her best friend going missing? He's probably consoled his daughter and things like that, and he's consoling members of the family. He's taking posters from the vigils, and instead of pinning them up as he's promised them to, he's bringing them back to torment Gina DeJesus, his victim.
This is a bit of a failure of the police as well, by the way, because we're listing all of these connections. And it's all in the same area, isn't it? It's not like he's, going out and hunting in different parts of the country, bringing these girls back. We're talking about a very specific area of the country and almost like limiting it to a street area. Do you know what I mean? So the fact that the police didn't knock on a few doors and try and find out what was happening, it's not good from them, is it?
Yeah, and I mean, let's be honest, like the police had have knocked on the door and tried to go in his home and had seen the state it was in, and obviously the fact that windows were boarded up, there was like secret passages and stuff, there he wouldn't let anyone go past the kitchen, and we'll get onto the fact that he actually had people in the home during this period. I think the police would have been onto him straight away, but unfortunately for the girls, that never happened. What did happen was eventually Amanda Berry falls pregnant. And in contrast to the multiple times that Michelle Knight falls pregnant, Ariel Castro now wants to keep the baby. As I say, he sees Amanda Berry as his wife in this sort of situation. Michelle Knight has become, let's be honest, somewhat of an annoyance to him by this point. He's not physically attracted to her. She's older now. He's never got on well with her on a social level. And I know this sounds mad because they're his captives, but he's way fonder of Amanda and Gina. And I think that Gina's younger. I actually think that it took a little bit longer for the assaults to start happening with Gina. He was holding her captive. They happened, and they happened multiple, hundreds of times and whatnot, but it took a little bit longer, and it was almost like he treated the other two girls better. So maybe it's not as shocking to find out that when Amanda Berry got pregnant, he wanted to keep the baby. And I believe that decision is really where the downfall of his plan started, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. And I think the story of how she actually even gave birth is particularly scary as well, by the way. He made Michelle deliver the baby, didn't it? That was just like, basically, set up a paddling pool in the basement, make Michelle deliver the baby. The baby nearly passes away, and Michelle has to resuscitate her, mouth to mouth, to keep this baby alive. But the baby survived, didn't it?
Well, not only that, he threatens Michelle that if the baby doesn't survive, Michelle won't survive.
It's terrifying.
But the baby does survive. They name her Jocelyn, and I believe that you can very much tell as she grows and develops and ages, Ariel Castro softens. He genuinely has a connection with this child. And in contrast to maybe the upbringing of his other 4 children, this is a child that he actually bonds with even more. This child is brought up knowing that her mother and her 2, what she thinks are her aunties, are chained up in a house with doors locked, not allowed to leave. And she thinks that's normal.
Yeah, it's absolutely crazy, isn't it? Like, she was homeschooled as well, wasn't she? She had very limited time in the outside world, but saying that, I feel like she had more time in the outside world than any of the women did, didn't she? Like, she was allowed to go outside. She was allowed to be in the garden. Did she go to anywhere else?
Yeah,
McDonald's?
she was, mate, people saw her with Ariel Castro in McDonald's. Like, even Ariel's brother, he has brothers and sisters, right? I think he's 1 of 9 children, but he had 2 brothers that were sort of involved in the case as it went on, and they saw Ariel in McDonald's with the child, and whenever people would see him that knew him with this child and all of a sudden think, hold on, where's this kid come from? The first thing they would think would be that it must be one of his grandchildren. And the second thing that they would think would be when they would actually approach him and ask him, he'd say, oh, it's my girlfriend's child. I've got a girlfriend and this is my girlfriend's child and whatnot. And his daughter even recalls a time that he showed her a picture of this child.
He showed me a picture that was in his cell phone, and he said, look at this cute little girl. I said, she's cute, who is that? And he said, this is my girlfriend's child. And I said, Dad, that girl looks like Emily. Emily's my younger sister. And he said, no, that's not my child, that's my girlfriend's child by somebody else.
So now the women have been held captive for years and years. We're in 2013. Jocelyn is now 6 years old, and she goes up one day to the room of her mother, Amanda Berry, who's obviously locked in the room at the time, chained up, and she tells Amanda Berry how Daddy's gone out and he's left one of the doors unlocked. And obviously, knowing that the treatment they've been put through, they're thinking it's a trap.
Yeah, absolutely. They'd be conditioned to do that, yeah, so they'd be pretty scared. She must be terrified in this moment.
Absolutely terrified. Yeah. But Amanda Berry had the bravery in that moment to think, do you know what?
This is
make
my
or
chance.
Break, fight or flight. This is my chance and I've got to go for it. And she manages to get herself downstairs into the kitchen. When she's in the kitchen, she starts banging on the door, and that is when we see the neighbor, Charles Ramsey, come to her rescue.
I'm talking with Charles Ramsey. He's a neighbor. Walk me through again what happened this afternoon.
I heard screaming. I meet my McDonald's. I come outside. I see this girl trying to get out of her house. I go on the porch, and she says, help me get out. I've been in here a long time. So, you know, I figured it's a domestic violence dispute. So I opened the door, and bro, I knew something was wrong when a little pretty white girl ran into a black man's arms. Dead giveaway.
And you had no indication that there was anything going on?
Bro, not a clue that girl was in that house. He just comes out to his backyard, plays with the dogs, tinker with his cars and motorcycles, goes back in the house.
So after that neighbor discovers Amanda banging on that door, the police were called, and this is where we get that chilling phone call.
Help me, I'm Amanda Berry. I'm the police.
Okay, and what's going on there?
I've been kidnapped, and I've been missing for 10 years, and I'm here. I'm free now.
It looks like you were calling me from
Across the street, I'm using the phone.
Okay, stay there with those neighbors. Talk to the police when they get there.
Okay.
Mate, it felt like a bit of a weird conversation, didn't it? Like, she was discussing with the 911 operator. I see all the comments on the video, like, the people were like, that 911 operator was a bit rude, didn't really help her very much. It was a pretty weird one, wasn't it? But she finally manages to get through. The police are actually only 2.5 minutes away. In the phone call, you actually see that there were 2 other women involved in the house. He actually names Gina and Amanda as being the 2 women that were missing and found. Obviously, Michelle wasn't listed as missing, so he doesn't call her out. But again, it feels so weird to me that he doesn't even do that. But she finally escapes. That is the moment they're released. Then, obviously, there's a manhunt got to happen. Amanda tells a story of who this guy is, where he's been, And the arrest,
she's even able to give a description of what he's wearing.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, she literally just saw him. So, and quite frankly, she probably knew where he was going to be, because this guy was a man of routine, and he's been taking his daughter there left, right, and centre. He was actually arrested in the McDonald's car park lot a few miles away, not very far away at all, and that is then where he gets taken into custody, and really where the sort of the next phase of this happens, right? He gets immediately charged with 4 cases of kidnapping, and then 3 charges of rape. In the state of Ohio, these charges that I've just listed off, they can have a minimum sentence of 10 years in prison, they can have a maximum sentence to life in prison, right? So he's looking at significant jail time. But it wasn't just him that was looking at that jail time, because while he was arrested, his brothers that you've mentioned quite a few times in this case so far, they were also arrested. So the brothers were called Pedro and Anil. They were arrested at the same time, but they were actually cleared of any wrongdoing, which is, I think, actually a bit controversial in the case, because as you say, they actually saw these... They were there at the house.
They saw the daughter, and obviously they had been in the house multiple times. But we get onto that, because before we finish this off, we'll speak about a few people that had noted being in the house and seeing strange things at the house. But the main important thing is the brothers are cleared. Yeah, the brothers are absolutely cleared. But then what happens is the FBI immediately get on this case, and they conduct an interview with Castro before the trial even starts, which I think is very revealing indeed. So what we're going to do is play a few clips from those interviews.
Do you remember the arrangements you made for Amanda?
I took her to the master bedroom.
Okay.
And I chained her to the bed.
When you had relations with her, was one leg still tied to the radiator?
No.
Did she stay in, is that where you slept in the house, in the master bedroom? Did she sleep in that bed?
Amanda, yes.
How often would you say that you had sexual relations with Amanda? On a daily basis?
Just whenever we felt like it. It was consensual.
It was consensual with Amanda?
The majority of it was consensual. Do you believe a word of that?
I think that's him trying to cope with what he's done. And I think in several instances, he's done rambling interviews, rambling statements. And I think what he's always trying to do is justify the horrific acts.
Mate, nothing says consensual like a chain round the leg. Do you know what I mean?
Amanda Berry, in his master bedroom, in his bed, but her leg is chained to a radiator.
He's chained.
That sounds completely normal.
Police must have such patience.
They really do.
Because police in America are armed as well. I'd like to be sat in the interview room and just go, bang, straight in the head.
Do you know what he does, though? He actually... You're going to have to blur that gunshot. To be fair, though, I think in those interviews, he kind of confesses. Doesn't he? Yeah. And I think there's also a key thing in the interview that we have to discuss is the side note.
Yeah.
It was a weird one. This note, I think, dated from 2004.
Yeah, it's very, very early on.
Very early on. And effectively, he says he's questioning his own acts. He's questioning whether he wants to live. He's questioning his own sanity. And he's questioning his behaviour, doesn't he?
You know what's mental as well, yeah? Is like, you know when you paint a picture of a monster in your head and then you see him in the interview room and it's like, you know, so many notorious people that have been in these situations, right? You look at Ariel Castro and you just think, you are just a pathetic little weasel. Do you know what I mean?
He is.
And I'm not saying you need to be a big, strong man to be able to carry out the acts that he did. He obviously threatened them with weapons and violence and whatever, and just genetically, a man is going to be able to dominate a woman physically anyway. But it's like, you're a pathetic little man. Like, in the real world, this is why you do this, because in the real world, no one's scared of you.
No. And look, this continued actually in the trial. So now we go from the FBI tapes, we go straight into the trial. The first court appearance was on May the 9th, and the bail that he was set was $8 million. Like, there was a big argument to say whether he should be let out on bail, whether he should be able to integrate into society. And again, like, let's be honest, mate, he should never have been let out. It was a pretty dangerous case, really. If you think, imagine if he'd reoffended again. It was really scary. Now, the interesting thing, the part of this was that in the initial trial appearance, obviously I've just mentioned the cases of kidnapping, very severe issues, but there was also a murder charge involved in this. So this is where the stakes get raised slightly. We're talking about life imprisonment going from kidnapped to, if there's murder involved, this is a death penalty state. So,
and the murder charges are that of the unborn children of Michelle Knight?
Yeah, it must have been those.
Yeah.
And I believe there were only 2 cases of those, even though Michelle Knight says
she
that there was more.
Claims there were 4 or 5, and also she claims that one of them happened during the period that Amanda Berry was pregnant with Jocelyn. Imagine that. One of the captives is pregnant and you're having the baby, and the other one you are doing
Nothing about this guy surprises me anymore. Do you know what I mean? It's just absolutely ridiculous. That was the initial first day of the trial. We learn all these new things, particularly about the sort of the death penalty sentence. We then go forward to June the 7th. He goes to the county courthouse. He's then accused of a total of 329 counts, including those 2 counts of aggravated murder, covering the period between 2002 and 2007. But it gets worse for him. There's a lot more charges than that, by the way.
Before you say it gets worse.
Yeah.
329. Do you know what the first thing that struck me when you said that?
Go on.
I don't think that's a third
of what actually happens. No. In fact, it's interesting you say that, because in July, it then gets raised to 977 charges.
I didn't even know that. There
including
you go.
512 for kidnapping, 446 and then obviously the aggravated murder. What is really interesting is that there's so much evidence and there's so much sort of eyewitness and there's so much sort of poignant testimony from these women that I find it so interesting that he actually pled not guilty in the first trial. Like when
now,
he first
do you
gets
think that again has something to do with the psychology of him? Like, obviously, he took great pleasure in watching the women suffer. He knew that if he pleaded not guilty, the chances were that he was going to have, well, not even the chances. He was going to have to sit in a courtroom and he was going to have to face the women. He was going to have to face their family. Do you think that there's any part of him that pled not guilty at first to take some sort of pleasure from that? Or do you think that the pleading changed when he realised that the death penalty was on the line?
I think it's more the second. And do you know why? Because I think he's got the mentality where he's trying to convince himself that he did nothing wrong. You saw that in the interviews, didn't you? And you saw that actually even in the courthouse. He was saying over and over again, I'm sorry. Like, I don't think I did anything wrong. There was consensual natures in this. I apologise to the women, but a lot of that they wanted. Like, it was like, he was almost like in his ramblings, he was always trying to say, I did nothing wrong. And I think in his head, a not guilty plea made sense, because he's like, these women have got to prove that I am guilty. But as you say, as soon as the death penalty comes in, I think the legal team that were representing him say to him, mate, this is going to get incredibly serious and you're way more likely to get the death penalty if you don't submit a plea and you don't go through it. So it gets really serious.
It's ironic that he submitted the guilty plea in the end to avoid the death penalty.
He does get charged. He is guilty of all of the crimes. So there's 937 charges that he pled guilty for. He actually got a significant life sentence, so 4 life sentences, and he also got 1,000 years on top of that. So basically, he was never, ever, ever getting out. There was no chance of parole. He was in prison for the rest of his life. And really, he deserved that.
And to top it all off, I don't want to say favourite, because it's like, how can there be any favourite moment about this case? But one moment about this case that forever lived with me, I should say, is when Michelle Knight stood up in court and got the chance to address her kidnapper.
Ariel Castro, I remember all the times that you came home talking about what everybody else did wrong and act like you wasn't doing the same thing. You said, at least I didn't kill you. You took 11 years of my life away. I spent 11 years in hell. Now your hell is just beginning. After 11 years, I am finally being heard, and it's liberating. Thank you all. I love you. God bless you.
He was sent to prison, and he didn't spend long in prison at all, did he? Because he was in there for a month.
Well, mate, I'd argue he didn't really do prison time, to be honest, because prison time would mean being amongst other inmates and obviously serious offenders and whatnot. He was in solitary confinement the whole time.
There was some weird stuff going on, by the way. Did you hear he was walking around naked in his cell?
Naked, covering the cell in feces, stuff like that. I think what he was trying to do is he was trying to convince... as much as he was trying to convince the court, also he was trying to convince the correctional officers in there that he was insane. And obviously everyone knows that a prison which hosts prisoners that are deemed insane is obviously a lot more lenient. You have a lot more freedom. You know, it's an easier time to serve if you can convince them you're insane.
And also, you know that if you're going to a real prison and you are sort of accused of the crimes that this man has been accused of and
fucked.
convicted of,
You're fucked.
You are in trouble. Messing around with kids is not very well looked after when you're in those sort of prisons.
There you go.
So he was in trouble.
He knew that, and he knew the walls were closing in. He knew that no one was buying his shit. And eventually, I'd like to say thankfully, but I don't think it is thankfully, man. I don't think it is thankfully. He
took the coward's way out, mate, didn't he?
He took the coward's way out.
Yeah.
He's found hung in his cell with bed sheets.
There were guards meant to be watching him, by the way. Every half an hour, they were meant to be checking in on him, even though he wasn't in a watch sort of routine. But the fact that he had threatened it in letters and things like that.
Mate, if I was one of those guards and I was suspecting that, I think I'd conveniently get a bad case of the shits. Have to spend an hour or two on the toilet.
Break.
Yeah. I'd find some sort of reason to not go back and check on him.
But the thing about that is, and I'm interested to see your perspective on this, but it is the easy way out.
Glad he's dead.
It's the easy way out.
That he
rather
didn't
he
have to
suffered.
serve his time and be subjected to some horrible shit in prison, basically. Yeah. Now we know, obviously, about what happened to Ariel Castro in the end. Obviously, the victims, I can give you a brief rundown on them. Amanda Berry and Gina DeJesus stay in a lot of contact, I believe. They both do work within the community and help kidnap victims and stuff like that. Amanda Berry, actually, I think works for a news station as well, and she does independent reports and whatnot. So both have had sort of flourishing careers off the back of it. All three girls have wrote best-selling books as well. Michelle Knight is a little bit more separated. I think she's now changed her name and whatnot, but she's by rights a best-selling author. But the main sort of question that people will have was like, how did he do this for so long and how did people not know? Do you honestly believe that no one knew that these girls were in the house?
I don't think you can go that period of time, and in the circumstances and the sort of just look at the house. The house alone was just really concerning, the way it was boarded up. I don't believe that people would just buy that this random girl that was with him, this young girl, 6-year-old girl and lower, was a friend of a friend or a friend's daughter. Like it just. There were a few things that didn't make sense. And I had to say, there were a few interviews, weren't there, with some people close to him that just didn't clock it at all. They said they didn't clock it at all. Like his musician friend, I remember, was interviewed. There were a few other interviews, weren't there?
Yeah, so there was the musician friend who was interviewed and he said that he heard sounds of banging, and Ariel Castro said, yeah, I've got dogs upstairs. I've got some dogs up there, and he turned the music on. They said he always had the music very loud when he had people in the house. There were reports from neighbours that they had seen women in the back garden, not just children, women in the back garden. And obviously all the reports of children and whatnot. It's very, very hard to cast judgment. His brothers have come out and pleaded complete innocence, complete unknowing to what was going on. And I think that one of them didn't see him as much. One of them used to see him a little bit more. But they both claim that when they went in the house, they were never let past the kitchen. Now, in hindsight, I think it's very, very simple and very easy to go, hold on, basic logic. Like, how are you not suspicious of this? But at the same time, I suppose that you do never know until you're in that situation. And despite me feeling like I would be massively suspicious and I would be, no matter whether it was my brother or my friend, I'd be turning him into the police if I even had this suspicion, you're not inside other people's heads.
Can I ask you a question, right? When people came round to the house, they were only limited to a certain room.
It was the kitchen.
But all of these devices and all of these sort of like mirrors and everything like that, right? Was that just outside the kitchen?
Well,
was the kitchen just had a door on it, and then all of this stuff was just behind that door?
No. They were in the kitchen. What you've also got to remember is Ariel is 5'10", I think he is.
Yeah.
Again, like I say, he's not a threatening figure. He's living on his own. He's living on his own in a state where guns are allowed. He's living on his own in what would be described as a rough community. You know, if you look at Seymour Avenue, it was a community that, you know, it wasn't a wealthy road by any means, and usually what you'll see is the cheaper in rent prices, the cheaper in house prices correlates directly with the higher rate of crime that takes place and stuff like that. So I think you could always use that as a as an excuse. You know, I'm worried about my house getting broken into. I'm worried about my house getting robbed. I've got expensive music equipment in here and stuff like that. I think there's ways that Ariel Castro could explain it away.
Yeah. Can I also just say, I think there was something quite symbolic that we haven't discussed after the trial. That house was actually knocked down afterwards, completely demolished. And actually, Michelle, none of the other victims were there, but Michelle was actually there to see it get knocked down. And I think that's a really sort of important moment for her to sort of, because, you know, she's lived a considerable part of her life in a very traumatic way and seen it being ripped down. I'm glad they did rip it down.
Now, the last part I want to come to on this, there's been a lot of people that have debated amongst themselves in the comment sections, many documentaries that I've watched on this specific subject and whatnot. And a lot of people suspect that Ariel Castro may have wanted to be caught. He may have done it consciously or subconsciously, but he knew that the gig was up and potentially wanted the closure upon it and whatnot. How do you feel about that? Because for a man to be so meticulous over a 10-year period and then one day to make such a gaping error, do you believe there's any substance to that? Do you believe at all that he felt that with his daughter growing and with her having way more exposure to the outside world than these girls had ever had, that ultimately the net was closing in on him?
Well, the time's pressing on, wasn't it? You know, that girl was going to grow up very quickly. You know, she was 6 at the time in which she escaped. You know, that can very quickly become 10, 12. She's grown into a woman. She's going to ask a lot of questions. Do you know what I mean?
When he's taking her to like McDonald's and stuff like that, yeah, what? Then McDonald's are empty, are they? No, they're not. They're filled with fucking mums and children's and stuff like that and whatever. What is that? Jocelyn, the young girl, I think she was only 6 at the time. So, okay, maybe a little bit young. But within years, if not months, she's going to start looking around in that McDonald's and going,
they're not chained up.
How come no one's chained up?
Yeah.
No one's chained up in here.
Yeah. But then the fact, to go back to the original question, which was, did he want to get caught? I feel like he would have just released one of them. Like, he obviously didn't like Michelle very much. If he wanted to get caught and get out of this issue, he could have just released them. Do you know what I mean? Like, for me, I think he made a mistake. And the mistake was he loved this daughter so much, Jocelyn. He absolutely loved her. And I think she had asked him several times if you can unlock certain doors and if you can leave things open. And he thought, because of what he'd done, he'd emotionally abused these women so much that they wouldn't even try and escape, because if they did, these consequences would be so severe. So I actually think
he definitely became more relaxed around the house.
And he became more relaxed because of the daughter.
Yeah, and I think the daughter softened him. I think she softened his stance. And I think that ultimately, I think that he had a decision on his hands. And this is gruesome, but I've got to give my theory on it. I think he had a decision on his hands. I think that he understood that he couldn't really pick one or the other. One being the 3 women he had captive, the other being his daughter. He was also, you know, he's in his 50s, he's getting to that age, his daughter's growing up, things like that. Eventually, she's going to get to an age where you're no longer the guardian for them that you once were. And they're going to want to step out into the world and whatever. And at that point, when his daughter decides she wants more freedom, he understands that he's going to have to do something to the daughter that, as far as we know, he's never done, which is chain her up.
Didn't imprison her, yeah.
Imprison her also, because she wasn't, as we say, she didn't know any different. She'd never been in anyone else's houses. She didn't know this, you know? No. So she didn't know that wasn't normal. And at one point, he was going to have to make that decision. And I think that there was the tiniest shred of empathy inside this man, and that came from his daughter.
Empathy towards the daughter, or just generally empathy?
Just towards the daughter. Just towards the daughter. And I think that he believed that some point or another, quite soon, I am going to have to chain my daughter up and hold her captive as well. And I don't want to do that. And the only thing I can do is off the 3 women, yeah? And I don't mean that in a disrespectful way. I'm just trying to get in his words. Yeah. Well, no, but words also you can use on YouTube, and words you can't use on YouTube. You've got to be careful. But take the 3 women out the equation, or take them all out the equation. And I think that he understands that if the 3 women are removed from the equation, the daughter is going to have questions, and those questions are going to intensify as she grows old. And I think that on some level, Ariel Castro knew that the gig was up, didn't he?
That was the beginning of the end. As soon as that daughter was born, that was the beginning of the end. And really, was that an accident? Like, was that daughter planned? We never know, really, do we?
No. But I'm very confident to say that if Jocelyn hadn't have been born, those women would, in some capacity, still be in that house.
Imprisoned.
Whether they were with us or not, they would be imprisoned inside that property. So mental case of Ariel Castro. I know there are parts of this story that we might have even missed out, so I hope you guys really enjoyed this one, and let us know your thoughts in the comment section below. Please do myself and Josh a massive favour by subscribing to the channel. A lot of you guys came here from the Chelsea channel, from the Kickoff, from the Pain Game and whatnot, but you honestly don't understand how much preparation goes in.
It's a lot of time and effort. Yeah, no, but we really appreciate everyone watching. We've got an unbelievable amount of subscribers already, and the love that we get on these videos is immense. By the way, the last video that we filmed, people were watching a crazy amount of it, so much more than most of our videos. So to say that they've enjoyed it and watched a lot of it means the world to us. So
and
we really
also, if you are regular viewers and you're liking all the videos and whatnot, let us know what sort of genre you're liking the most, whether you're liking all of it or whatnot. Obviously, we're doing quite a bit of the true crime. We're looking back at old reality TV series, stuff like that. We're basically covering anything we're interested in, really. So either way, hit the subscribe button. Let us know your thoughts. Share it with a friend. That would massively help us out. And we will see you all in the next one.